Good morning, ICL. The good news is out. A third graduate school is on its way to Willamette University, joining the business and law schools. In a period when private liberal arts colleges suffer from lower enrollments, Willamette is proactively building the magnet that will bring more students to our campus. The Claremont School of Theology is the third star in Willamette's growth and diversity. Over several years, professors from both schools have been key in making the addition possible. Stephen Patterson from Willamette, Andrew Dreitzer, and Philip Clayton from Claremont. Unfortunately, Professor Dreitzer is down with the flu, but Philip Clayton has generously stepped in to join the conversation. ICL members, you already know Professor Patterson from his recent lectures in early Christianity. He will introduce you to Philip Clayton in just a moment. I want to tell you what a huge honor Steve Patterson received since he last spoke at ICL. Hold on. An award of $100,000 for his book, The Forgotten Creed, Christianity's Original Struggle Against Bigotry, Slavery, and Sexism. If that title sounds familiar, it's because it's the book that he lectured to us on his last appearance. Now I'll turn it over to Steve, who will introduce Philip, and they will explain how and why the Claremont School of Theology. Please welcome our speakers.
Philip, why don't you take this podium? Good morning. Thank you, Ann, for that generous introduction, and it's good to be back here with you all. If anybody has a tuxedo that is 42 short, I'm going to need one in a few weeks for that award. So it's actually just a 99,900 or $800 because I have to spend $200 for a tuxedo. Extra expenses. But we're here to talk about something much more important here this morning, and that is the coming to Willamette University, the Claremont School of Theology in Southern California. And to my left here is Professor Philip Clayton, the Ingram Professor of Theology at CST. And he is standing in for Andrew Dreitzer, who is unfortunately down with the flu. Don't be scared. He has not got the COVID-19 virus. He just has a normal flu as far as we know, but could not travel. And so Philip graciously agreed to step in. And I am so grateful. I've been sitting in on a course that Dr. Clayton is doing on religion and science this term. It's a rare privilege to be able to sit in with a colleague as they do their best stuff. And Philip does a lot of different things in theology. He's the author of 20-some books and hundreds of articles. He's truly a world-class scholar, and one of his areas of real expertise is religion and science. And so I'm just learning so much from him in this. So to my left again, Philip Clayton from the Claremont School of Theology. Please welcome him.
Thanks very much. Thank you. And they told me I wasn't really eligible to be Willamette faculty until I'd spoken to ICL. So it's I've made a start. Also, I feel like neighbors. I've been coming since the fall and teaching joint courses, 1 week down there, 1 week up here, with all kinds of technical cameras and microphones and things to make it possible to bond Willamette students and CST students in the same classroom. And I live steps from here, 1280 Bellevue, the house that we picked up for when we're up here. So, you know, I could have come in my bathrobe, but I didn't think you'd approve. So we have a lot we want to cover in a short period of time, and we're both committed to keeping our words short so you can ask your questions and make your comments and make it a little bit more dialogical. That's really important to us. So let me just, speaking of dialogical, ask Steve to start by saying, well, how did this all come about? Why am I on this stage right now, right? And why is this thing happening?
Well,
give us a background a little bit.
It's going to be interesting this morning to sort of compare notes because you know the story from the CST side, and I know the story really from the beginning. Really, for me, is December 17. What is that? 2017? Yeah, 2017. What millennium are we in? I'm not even, I sometimes.
I can help with that one.
I struggle with the date, but
These
never.
Historians, you know,
but never.
it's less than 1,000 years.
Never have I struggled with the millennium. Deb will be delighted with that one. So here we are in the 21st century, the 17th year of the 21st century.
You are a historian, I can tell.
So it was Christmas, and many of you know my wife Deborah, who is a minister, and I was sharing my long tale of woe with Steve Thorsett that she had Christmas services, and so we never go anywhere on Christmas. We're always at home, and blah blah blah. And so he quite kindly that year took pity upon me and said, "Well, why don't you join us?" And so that year we joined. Steve and Rachel and their extended family. We had Christmas there, and during Christmas dinner, a little after dinner, Steve took me aside and said, "I had an interesting phone call this week." So now I know that it wasn't just he was having pity on me, it was that he had another question to ask, right? And so the phone call had been from Jeffrey Kwan, who is the president of the Claremont School of Theology, whom I've known for probably 25 or 30 years. We were graduate students at about the same time. And Steve shared with me that Jeffrey had broached the question of whether or not we might be interested in talking about the School of Theology in Claremont coming to Willamette University to be part of our collegium. And this was a stunning statement. I didn't really know what he was talking about at first. It was just too stunning, because the Claremont School of Theology is, in the world of theology, is a very big deal. It's a very, very big deal. It's by far the most important school of theology on the West Coast, and it is in that same dialogue with Harvard and Yale and Chicago, the other great divinity schools of our country, and has a global reach. And it also has a place in my heart because I did my PhD at the Claremont Graduate School in the 1980s, which in those days had a joint PhD program with the School of Theology at Claremont. And I did lots of my work in the library there, and many of my professors were appointed at both places. So this was a thrilling thing for me personally, which I tried to tampen down when Steve was telling me all this. So when classes resumed in January of 2018 then, we convened a small group of people. Steve asked Deb Ringgold of the AGSM, the Atkinson Management School, to join us, and Stephen Green from the law school, and of course Karen Wood, who on our faculty has probably the most experience with theological education. And and Carol Long, the provost. And we began then a very quiet conversation during that spring about what this would mean and how we might ask our various stakeholders about it. And most importantly, the faculty, what would they think about adding another graduate school to our collegium? And so we started a kind of quiet conversation. The next school year, it got a little bit more serious. So that's what, 2018-19. And at the beginning of 2018, our respective boards of directors signed an agreement to enter a process of due diligence. And so discovering all of our closets, all our secrets, all of our stuff. And after that year-long process, our board of directors, in the fall of, this past fall, entered into an affiliation agreement with the board of directors of the Claremont School of Theology. So this year, we've been working on the details of how to make this happen, and the administrative details, and I've been mostly involved in the academic details. What kinds of academic programming are we going to have to think about, and how do our faculties relate to one another? And so that's what's going on right now. This summer, the School of Theology will actually move. They will evacuate their campus and hop in a caravan of microbuses, that's how I imagine it, Volkswagen minivans, and drive north to Salem, and next year they will be in residence here, although we will not be formally merged next year. We'll have another year of working at the legal aspects of the thing, and then hopefully then by the following fall. So a year from this fall, we will be fully merged, and the Claremont School of Theology will in fact be our third graduate professional school. Yeah. So some of you know maybe a little bit about CST, but I'm going to presume that most of you don't know very much at all. So I thought I'd just ask Philip, if you would kind of just give us the lowdown on sort of introduction of what the Claremont School of Theology is, and he has a little a PowerPoint that goes with that. So Philip, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, so it's a school that dates back to 1885. It was called Maclay School of Theology, and it was founded in that year in San Fernando, the town of San Fernando, by the mayor, who was also a Methodist. In those years, you could get away with that. It's harder now, I think, right? And it was a place to train, at that time, young men for the ministry. It stayed there for quite a while until about 1900, so 15 years. And then it affiliated with the University of Southern California, which was, at the time, a Methodist institution. And it gradually became more secular and put pressure on the school to give up this kind of prophetic struggling with questions of justice and injustice and right in American culture, and how the church could speak and be relevant to the world we live in. And the prophetic faculty of CST, which the grad school, said, we can't do this. We can't just teach objective facts about religion. We really want to be a voice. So here's let's hold on for a sec. So we want to be a voice for something prophetic. So in 1957, we left USC and came out to affiliate with the Claremont colleges and Claremont Graduate University or Graduate School. Bought some land. They ceded us some land, and we built the school. And that's where we remained until today. Here's the school now. It's along Foothill Boulevard, the old Route 66, right? Literally. It's probably 1957. You can imagine the cars. Some of you might own those cars as they moved up and down. They built it in, what is that, is it Neo-Roman? Is that the style?
I don't know.
It's a preserved landmark, so we have to be very careful about, I'll bet this has a button. on it. Really good at this. I'm not going to touch buttons anymore, Cornell and I promise. So this is the overhead view. These are the three buildings of the library. There, you can show us. Right, that should be the Mud Auditorium. Then the library is the other one. And then the administration building. And behind it, this is actually early after it was built, because the land was still there. This is the Rancho Santa Ana Botanical Gardens behind it, where you can walk and walk. I've written more articles and books back there. And there was a path just leading from that chapel, the White Chapel, on back.
I used to walk home on that path every day.
Did you?
Yeah.
Up that path?
Yeah, up that path.
And you lived up there by Blaisdell or
On
something?
the left up there, yeah.
Yeah, and we live the second block up. So my kids have been there since first grade, and we've been biking so that we don't have to. Here's looking out from the school across Foothill to the shops on the other side. And here from the other side of Foothill, Route 66, you can look up to the library and the administrative building here on that side. And one more, oops, sorry. And there's the chapel. It's a really beautiful space. That's something we're going to be sad to leave behind. Yeah. Beautifully set up. So there's where we were in 1885 in San Fernando at that time. Let me just present to you the mission statement and then give you a sense of who we are and what we do. So Claremont School of Theology is United Methodist in origin, ecumenical in spirit. We're nurtured by scripture, tradition, experience, and reason. And if you're Methodist, do you know what those are? That's the Wesleyan quadrilateral. The four pieces that Wesleyans believe all fit together. Not just faith alone, or experience alone, or scripture alone, but that beautiful intersection. Picture a box, a quadrilateral, where all four of those play a role. To prepare people for lives of ministry, leadership, and service. Our graduates become agents of transformation and healing in churches, local communities, schools, nonprofit institutions, and the world at large. One quick way to give you a sense of what... Oh, okay. I guess I can carry it over here, can't I? See, that's pretty high tech for me. Here are some of the centers that are a part of Claremont School of Theology. The Center for Engaged Compassion, where Frank Rogers and Andy Dreitzer do compassion trainings. They did those in Rwanda after the genocide there. They've done them in Palestine. They've done them with members of the Senate and House of Representatives to approach situations with compassion and not fear. In cases where there's conflict, with street people, with leaders in organizations that are at battle. Center for Spirituality and Sustainability, which I founded with some other colleagues about 8 years ago. Again, looking for ways that spirituality might lead us to live in more sustainable ways. The Center for Global Peace Building, built by a Muslim faculty member who really wanted Muslims to be a part of global peace building. One of our most famous centers is the Center for Process Studies, and it has a number of programs. One, the Institute for Ecological Civilization, which has just held a meeting in Cape Town, South Africa on the Day Zero water crisis. 3 meetings with the mayor of Seoul on transitioning Seoul to a genuinely sustainable city, and meetings around the world. EcoCiv Korea has done those programs. And then IPDC, the Institute for the Postmodern Development of China, has 36 centers in China leading to a kind of government that we advocate for that brings genuine commitment toward a sustainable way
Philip,
of living. Yeah, jump in.
I just want to jump in here a minute and just underscore some of this because I want you to know that Philip isn't just blowing smoke here. He's earnest. This is actually what they do. So the Institute for Ecological Civilization, for example, when was the inaugural meeting? 2014?
2015.
2015 in Claremont. And they had 3,000 scientists and theologians from around the world gathered for that inaugural meeting to talk about the future of our planet. It was one of the most astonishing meetings on the climate crisis, way ahead of where most of us have been, by the way. And this is the kind of global reach that the Claremont School of Theology has had for many years now. And you'll nerd a little bit more about that in the course of the morning. But I just want to underscore that that is what we're talking about. We are talking about a school with a Center for Engaged Compassion that does conflict resolution, sometimes with the United States House of Representatives. That's what they do. So it's quite astonishing. This is all in a day's work for Philip. He doesn't know that this is.
I assume that's what that you normally do in your classrooms. One thing that's been very basic for CST is to be interreligious. We were one of the seminaries that had a Jewish faculty member when most Christian seminaries didn't, and we now have representatives of most of the world's religious traditions on our faculty. And here's how we describe it: as an ecumenical and interreligious institution, we seek to instill students, look at these three, I'm very proud of it: ethical integrity, religious intelligence, and intercultural understanding, which we believe is necessary to become effective in thought and action as leaders in the increasingly diverse, multi-religious world of the 21st century. And I hope that you'll allow me to take just a little sidestep why a seminary in the Methodist tradition would be a leading place for the world's religious leaders to come together. What we've learned from doing this work back to the early 1980s, one of our first faculty members, John Cobb, was holding interreligious meetings when it wasn't a popular thing at all. And we believe that difference doesn't have to be divisive. It's when people are uncertain and threatened that they become dogmatic. But if we can meet in ways that allow us to share our strengths and share our culture, then we don't have to be dogmatic about it. We can share what and who we are. So in 2008, we began, under a new president, a program of trying to, listen, desegregate religious education. Another desegregation movement. We believe that you're not going to have Christians, Jews, and Muslims getting along unless their clergy study together, unless they open each other's sacred books together and learn how that goes. So our president, Jerry Campbell, brought an imam from the Southern California mosque and the president of a Jewish school together with him, and they started reading their scriptures together every month. A friendship grew, and they said, let's form an interreligious university. We found a donor who said he would support it financially. I was asked to step in as the provost, and by 2012, we were in full gear launching. This is one of the inaugural meetings.
Claremont Lincoln is actually the creation of a much older institution, the United Methodist affiliated Claremont School of Theology, founded in 1885. It partnered with Southern California's Academy of Jewish Religion and the Islamic Center of Southern California to form this new school. Students attending the school can get master's degrees in divinity, rabbinic studies, and Muslim counseling.
So now you could take what the Christians could teach, the Jews could teach, and the Muslims could teach, and the students could take classes from all of them. It was an amazing experience to watch. Here's the one of the inaugural ceremonies where Christians, Jews, Muslims, and Jains, they were the first Asian religion to join, would be standing together. We took a bus trip at our inaugural meeting in 2011, September, to the Jain Center of Southern California and took a tour of their facility and learned about Jain practices, which we didn't know much about at the time. Interreligious work means bringing together the world's great religious traditions and focusing on applied religion. Let's not fight over the beliefs that are different. Let's fight about the ways that we want to change the world in a positive way together. So we would take global problems and see whether in the resources of our different traditions, we could have more to offer as religious individuals to the problems that humanity is struggling with the most. So we tried to think of the academic pieces as the foundation, and then interdisciplinary programs shared across the different religions, and then these centers, like the Center for Engaged Compassion, as places where we came together as the members of the different religions. By the time that I was no longer working with the program, we had brought in Jains. This is a Jain giving the traditional blessing that Jains give. Jains are one of the most peace-oriented, nonviolence-oriented religions. This is Professor Saeed, a Muslim professor. This is the president of the Jewish Academy for Jewish Religion. And here are some of the people who came together. These are many of the Jain people who came together for the first meeting. So by bringing together those resources, we had students who would say, I'm taking Hebrew Bible, and I'm studying Quran, and I'm taking New Testament. And when I become a pastor of a Methodist church in Washington, and I arrive in the city for the first time, what do you think I'm going to do? I'm going to call up the rabbi and call up the imam and say, hey, let's get together for coffee. Maybe we can find a way to work together. Do you guys see how revolutionary that is? No fear. And the pastors, the clergy, are the ones who are helping bring folks together. We had the ambassador from South Africa, a Muslim, speak at our inauguration. And I want you to just hear a quote from what he told us. Are these beautiful words? Ibrahim Rasool said, recognizing the divine in each other is the lost skill of humankind. How cool is that? How do we speak to the divine in the other before we speak to his race or nationality? How do we greet the divine in the other before we judge her language, color, or hair type? How do we relate to the divine in each other before we get agitated by the myriad different ways we believe, worship, pray, and chant? How do we see the spiritual in each other before claiming exclusivity and uniqueness for our particular doctrine, theology, or ideology? Can you say amen to that? Just really inspiring. And you take young men and women who have a call to ministry as Jews, Muslims, and Christians, or a call to leadership as Hindus, Buddhists, and Jains, and ask them to learn their tradition and their lifelong ministry in this framework. It's beautiful. We've kept that. We haven't kept the name Claremont Lincoln University, but we've kept that ethos. And the Claremont School of Theology that's moving to Willamette this summer has that as its core mission. Fantastic meeting across the traditions. We still promote Jain studies programs in India for our students to go to learn about. Listen to what one young American Muslim woman has to say about the program.
The school's ambition to train Muslim clerics is important to Valentina Khan, a Muslim American student of Iranian descent.
I definitely think that we need to have a voice that's an American voice as Muslims. I mean, having somebody in Saudi Arabia tell us how it should be here in America is, in my opinion, not the way I'd want to be told.
She went on to found a nonprofit called O Jerusalem, where Jews, Muslims, and Christians did social service work together across Los Angeles. An inspiring young American leader. I mean, after all, look at the different teachings of Jesus, the Torah, and Prophet Muhammad. Look at the overlap. To the golden rule, as we call it, is shared in all three traditions. And I want to close my little introduction to CST by giving you a sense of the stories from the classroom, the campus, and the world. Here we have a Muslim leader from the Middle East, a Jew, and a Christian theology student engaged in dialogue in the library. You walk by and you see conversations like this, and you see walls being broken down by their ability to form friendships. This was a beautiful ceremony where a Korean Buddhist came over and had done this work, had done a handwritten manuscript in Korean of a famous Buddhist sutra. It's placed inside this, this figurette, and that figurine goes on the altar, and with that handwork that had taken him, it was some incredible thing, like 800 hours of devotion to this, and is placed there as one of the objects in our space of worship to bring that Buddhist presence together with the other religions who worship together. A student formed Rock Hill Farm in Bakersfield for men who had been released from prison after serving sentences for first-degree murder. Men who have the hardest time starting over again. They farmed this farm together outside of Bakersfield. They started each morning at 6 a.m. with a Bible study, and we would drive down. I remember leaving at 4 a.m. or something to meet these men who are beginning to find how to reintegrate into society again. What we do in religion has social and political implications. If we're fanaticists and terrorists, those are implications for the negative. But if we can turn our attention to the positive aspects of religion, they are features for the positive. We can stand up out of our various religious motivations against violence and oppression. We organized the justice track of the World Parliament of Religions, 3-hour program for 5,000 people led by members of Claremont School of Theology to come together and to look at injustice around the world in the way that all the world's religious traditions can be a part of the solution. We featured Africa in particular and collected videos from leaders who couldn't be present that we showed to the 5,000 delegates in Toronto in 2018. There are many ways where, as religious people, we can speak up against global economic injustice and emphasize concern for the poor. Climate change is a huge issue for us, and we're involved in many ways in addressing, you see that red line? The areas of poverty are the areas of the greatest suffering. The changes are not affecting the rich, but by the nature of the climate, those who have not caused pollution are already being affected. That's a whole talk, so we'll talk about it another time. And finally, the goal was to see how the different features of life all integrate from this larger global religious perspective, the social, the ecological, the economic. So we come to something, see the spot in the middle, that's genuinely sustainable. So the road ahead for CST, we believe we live in a hybrid world now, racially, ethnically, and religiously hybrid, that we need to understand our identities in more complex ways. Each of us, too, is a hybrid of cultures, families, education, and for many of us, religious influences. And we need to learn to reach out to others across religious divides to make connections together. So our mission as CST at Willamette is to help solve global problems and to leave the world a better place. That's who we are, you guys. So Steve.
You need your mic, yeah.
I think you're about to turn things over to discussion. You have
Yeah,
some
just
comments
about,
first?
yeah, so you can understand why I was excited to hear that CST was interested in coming to Salem and relocating here and becoming the Divinity School of Willamette University. This is not just any school of theology, and if it were, I don't think that we would have been really open to this kind of conversation with them.
Can I ask maybe an embarrassing or
please
difficult
do.
question?
Yeah.
Why would Willamette University, as a secular university, want to take a school of theology? I mean, that it doesn't immediately fit. So I'm embarrassed to ask you, and somebody might hear us, but I'd be interested. Like,
it is an
honestly,
unusual thing, yeah.
What is your thought about that?
You know, you could say on the one hand, well, all the great universities have divinity schools. Harvard has one, Yale has one. Why shouldn't Willamette University have one? And that's, for a lot of people, a good enough answer. But I don't know of any other secular or secularized university. And I should qualify that because Willamette is a historically United Methodist university, and that's why the Claremont School of Theology began talking with us, because we have that common Methodist heritage. But I don't know of an example of a secular university like Willamette who has started a divinity school or started into this new without yes, older divinity schools perdure, but who has added one? I don't know of any. And secular universities like ours have become a kind of bastion of secularism. And some of that is healthy and some of that's not healthy. I think some of us think of the university as the place where it's sort of a religion-free zone, where secular values can thrive, and to let any religion in the door, even religious studies such as I do, is like opening the gates to the enemy, right? And together with that is usually the idea that Western civilization is becoming more and more secular. And of course, if we just ignore religion, it'll go away. Well, that's the kind of thinking you see, though, at a lot of universities. And so I've tried to persuade people that that is wrong, that the world is not becoming more and more secular. It's still very religious. 86% of the world's population still claims an affiliation with some religious tradition. And we are trying to educate students here to go into the world fully equipped to deal with the world in all of its diversity, to deal with people in all of their complexity, and yet we're not doing anything with theology, with religion, with belief, if you will. Now we study religion, but our religious studies faculty is very, very small. It's almost perfunctory. And so to take in a school of theology is a way of becoming a more complex, more complete, more interesting, and more committed version of who we are. That big part of human life that we've just left off to the side because we didn't like it or didn't know what to do with it or whatever, we're going to bring into the midst of our university, and in a big way. And honestly, that wasn't an easy decision. No, it wasn't easy at all. And, especially among faculty who have a kind of identity that is cultivated by the place they are. So what would it mean to change your identity by bringing in a school of theology? And there was a lot of resistance to that at first, but the more our faculty and staff, the more our stakeholders began to realize and understand what the Claremont School of Theology is and what it represents, the kinds of things that you've just seen, they became more and more excited about the prospects. And now we have a university that is very, very excited about what's happening next for us, and are just counting the days until we can really fully integrate everything that CST is doing. Philip, I don't know. I could ask you, I guess, the same question, I guess. What do you think? I mean, moving from Southern California here is a big, big deal. And I'm not going to ask you about the personal struggles with that. I mean, people uprooting families and faculty loading up the van and moving to a whole different place. But as you think about going from Claremont, where you are a freestanding institution, to Willamette, where you'll be part of a large university, what are some of the struggles and opportunities you all have seen in that?
I can think of 3 reasons. If we are involved in bringing the resources of religious traditions to bear on the world's most urgent problems, then we need to be in the world and not in Holy Hill, right? Not set off from the world where only seminarians come. That, for me, would be crucial. Theology, secondly, needs to not be seen as something that lives inside church buildings. It needs to be seen as a statement of core values that speak to the world today. I mean, frankly, a God that lives on a cloud off in the distance somewhere is not going to be very helpful. But if there is some kind of deeper level or ground or values that underlie human lives that call us to something higher, then dang it, it ought to be in the world. It ought to be there where it can do some good. And I guess I'll close thirdly with maybe a more radical statement. Steve, I'm not sure that I can endorse a distinction between the sacred and the secular any longer. So from the side of secularity, I hear the Willamette students trying to say, we don't have to exclude religion. It's part of the modern world, 86%. So we should include that discussion for our students on our campus. Yeah. But shouldn't the same thing be true on the sacred side? Yeah. We're not in a world where those who claim the name God run the world any longer. And when they try to run the world, it usually goes badly. And now I'm really going to get in trouble. Is that my president calling? Yes, President Kwan. But I actually think that if those who represent religion see ourselves as servants of the needs of the world, like Florence Nightingale, like Joan of Arc maybe, like a certain first century rabbi who walked the dirt lanes of Galilee and raised questions about what it meant to render unto Caesar what is Caesar's and unto God what is God's, strikes me actually as maybe the more accurate place for a 21st century disciple of that first century rabbi to be.
Let's open it up for questions, shall we? Yeah. So, what are your questions so far? I see a lot of hands going up really quickly.
Whoa!
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a microphone, and I'll be passing them, as we both will. We go back and forth.
Oh, I don't know how to recognize all these people, so
We know.
let's let the microphone handlers do the picking and choosing, and we can just call balls and strikes.
I just would like to say that it would seem a perfect thing to slide your view of world work into not only to ourselves are we born. I mean, what greater, golden rule is that? That's
Perfect.
straight up.
I should have said that, so thank you. That was the correct answer to Steve's question.
That'll be solemn.
Thank you so much. This is exciting and inspirational. I have two kind of mundane questions. One, what will this school be called? Willamette Graduate School, or will it still be Claremont School of Theology?
Claremont School of Theology at Willamette University.
Okay, got that. Then the other thing I was wondering about, will undergraduates be folded into possibly taking some classes so it's not exclusively for grad students?
That's a Steve question.
Yes. Usually in a university that has a divinity school, undergraduates, certainly advanced undergraduates, often cross over and register for classes in the Div school. And also, professors in the Div school frequently teach classes that would be primarily for undergraduates. And so there will be that kind of back and forth with the Claremont School of Theology also. So we'll be doing that kind of crossover. We don't have all that worked out yet. And maybe in the second hour, I'll talk a little bit more about some of the academic possibilities that we're considering. But yes, there will be that kind of back and forth. Let me just add, it's important for us to keep the Claremont name with this school. The Claremont School of Theology has a kind of global bandwidth that we don't want to walk away from. And Willamette University doesn't have that kind of bandwidth in the theological world. We don't have a footprint there at all. And so it's important for us to keep that name as we bring Claremont into our midst. So it'll be the Claremont School of Theology at Willamette University. Yeah.
Jeanette, thank you so much. This is the most exciting thing I've heard in a long time.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
With your vision and your mission statements, and I think putting religion or faith issues in the proper setting. Onto a more mundane thing. Are you going to build buildings? Where's this going to be located? How is this going to change Willamette or grow Willamette?
Yeah, Steve, that's a Steve question. All the hard ones are for him, and I'll take the rest.
Let me ask a question of you. Do you have $20 million you'd like to invest in a new building? Initially, the school will be located in what is known locally as the Micah Building. We've entered into a relationship or agreement with the United Methodist Church down the block here, and so they are now restructuring some of the space of that to accommodate all of the faculty from the School of Theology, and then the classes will be held in the university, worked into our other space scheduling. So that's how it will operate at first, and hopefully, I think the dreamers are dreaming that there will be a new beautiful building to welcome this school. That's many years off and a lot of conversations away. But again, if anybody has $20 million they'd like to invest into a beautiful new home for this school, you can talk to Philip afterwards and he'll take your name and address. Thank you.
Hi, this is Virginia. Maybe this is a you question, Philip. And perhaps this just shows more my ignorance of the area in which I live. How do you think coming to this community, which is maybe a little bit smaller than the one that you're from, will affect, your picture showed the Jain Center, the Muslim community, the Jewish community. I think we have a slightly smaller pool here. As I say, that might be my own ignorance, and World Beat always amazes me at our diversity. How do you think that will affect your program?
Mm-hmm. We already have largely students global from across the globe. In my online class now, I have people living in the United States who are from the Pacific Islands. I have somebody actually taking the class from Samoa and Tonga. We have many Korean students because we have a reputation in Korea. But I really appreciate the question because it lets me say that the market for a School of Theology is not what you might have thought before. We do serve Protestants and Catholics in the United States and especially in the Pacific Northwest. But increasingly, the people who come to seminaries call themselves SBNR. Have you ever heard that phrase before? Spiritual but not religious. And so they will say, and the Pacific Northwest is famous, as you probably know. You're at 32% of your younger PNW people who call themselves SBNR, or spiritual independence, or you heard the phrase the nuns, right? The nuns and the duns. And so increasingly numbers of students are from that. And we're actually excited about that. You can be interested in engaged compassion and not call yourself a Methodist or Presbyterian or Catholic. And a lot of students are finding spiritual identities outside of traditional religion. And then the last thing to say is we are in particular interested in Pacific Rim partnerships. Like I mentioned, the centers in China, Korea. You happen to have somewhere near here, international university with a name Tokyo on it, right? This is their classroom, isn't it? And that makes Willamette really interesting because you have a very tight connection across the Pacific as we do. So that's another form of the partnership. I just came from a meeting working on getting a joint agreement with the private universities in Korea and China and Willamette for a sustainability program. How cool is that?
Yeah, I just want to add that you might think of Willamette as a kind of local university here, but we think of ourselves, and we are developing our university as a kind of Pacific Rim university. And the relationships that we have in China and in various parts of Asia are being enhanced a great deal by our conversations with CST. So this is something we're going to be able to do together in a much bigger way. Yeah.
This is Ken. I'm just curious, given Claremont's Methodist roots, whether the split that's going on in the Methodist Church today has had any impact on you.
Yeah. Thanks, Ken.
That's kind of on our agenda for the afternoon,
oh, okay.
Or for the second hour. Do you want to do that now, Philip? Or
no, we're going to, because we feel a break coming on pretty soon. But Ken, don't let me out the door without answering that question. There's lots to say about it.
Yeah, that's a big, big question, yeah.
This is Barbara. I'm wondering where you're going to have these classes, because we've been bounced around all year because there's a shortage of classroom space now. So exactly where do you think they will be?
That'd be a Steve question.
I don't want to enter into your disputes with the university about where you will meet. So I'm going to dodge that question. Now, let me just say, we don't have a lot of spaces that are this big. All right, so you have a big ask, and we probably have 3 or 4 spaces that are this big, but we have lots and lots of spaces for classes that are 20 to 30 students, and that's our normal classroom space. And our undergraduate census is down somewhat over the last 5 years, as is the case with most colleges and universities. So we do have the capacity to host their classes without too much stretching. And Philip alluded to his online class, and I would say that that's another exciting thing about CST. They have pioneered a way of doing theological education in a kind of hybrid in-person model with a big online component. So people come for a couple of weeks, get to know each other, have an experience together, and then go away and participate in an online experience. And so a lot of the education at CST takes place that way. And so that won't require the kind of spaces you're talking about. And so anyway, I think it's not going to be a problem for us, I don't think.
Do you tell me when you want to do the break?
Let's leave it to you for when you want to call the break.
When we can do that now if you like. When we have,
it's all totally up to you.
Here's what often happens when the same people present for the whole morning. We break at the 25 past and start again, and we split the hour up. However, now we have half a minute. I don't know if Bob's capable of doing.
Let's take one more question.
Yes, I am Bob, and I am capable. The question is, what was the motivation of the Claremont School of Theology to move at all? I want to know more about that. It ties into the success of its ultimate objectives.
Yeah, exactly. So I was a previous dean, and the economics for small schools are not good. The government has more and more compliance controls, and you just can't, and the software is for 2,000 or fewer. Even though we've just had our largest class, 2017 was the largest class in the history of the school, the economics don't work. So all over the country, freestanding seminaries are joining large universities. And that's why Steve asked this question, what do each side gain? But to us, it's unambiguous. Even apart from finances, we wanted to be part of a secular university where we could be a voice in dialogue and not the angel factory on the hill, where it's just like, here, God told us and here we go. That's not helpful.
Okay, this does take us to our break. Thank you very much. See you in 10 minutes.
So what we're going to show you, just to start off the second hour here, is just a very short little film that the Claremont School of Theology has made to really, it's kind of an in-house thing for the community and stakeholders for CST, explaining the move to them. As you can imagine, it's quite a surprise to a lot of people. And so, but I saw it the other day. They just released it, and I thought it was very, very helpful and wonderful. So I've asked Gwinnell if we can start off with showing this film. So here it is.
The welcome to this school is closely related, I think, to the story that's told in the book of Exodus of the going out of the children of Israel. It wasn't too many years ago that the faculty of this school and a handful of modern Israelites were in captivity on the grounds over at SC, and they came out here to Claremont, out into the wilderness. And I would suspect that more than one time the students said to the administration, "Why have you brought us out here to die in the wilderness?"
When I came to Claremont, we had no buildings, no land, no campus, and a deficit the day I arrived of $40,000. When I look that far back, I feel fairly good about the distance we have come.
Claremont School of Theology has a history of reinventing itself. I mean, that's a part of its DNA. It began in the Valley as the McClay College, Bible College. From there, it moved to Los Angeles, of all places, from the Valley, rural, to an urban setting, and it becomes part of the Department of Religion at the University of Southern California. Then, in the 1950s, there's an opportunity to move. And so they go to Claremont, and they find Pomp Caldwell, who is a legendary educator, to lead the school. And so it becomes the School of Theology at Claremont, which eventually became Claremont School of Theology. Once again, it's moving to Willamette University in Salem, Oregon. And I can hardly wait to see what Claremont does as Claremont School of Theology at Willamette.
The school has attracted a highly visible group of producing scholars to its faculty. Ask anyone in the field of theological education to list the 6 best seminary faculties in the country, and Claremont will be there. Someone once called STC the Caltech of the theological world.
I came 1 year after the school opened its doors in Claremont. The School of Theology at Claremont is looked at as one of the progressive seminaries. I think the word progressive has the right meanings.
It's not every day that you're in a classroom, especially in a school of theology, where you're sitting next to an imam and a rabbi and a church pastor from down the street, and everybody's talking. Those persons would not generally come together to have conversation, right, around the person of Jesus or around political issues. And for me, it was like, that's a new kind of education.
So this is a class called Seizing an Alternative Toward an Ecological Civilization. So this is a CST class and a Willamette class connected by a whole bunch of brand new technology. So we link as a single class, we separate for exercises, and we come back together to do lectures and sharing together.
Been saddened that the school will no longer be in Claremont, but I think that for the school to engage the world and to continue to be the world-class institution that it is, this was a necessary change.
When it became clear to me that the move was imminent, I did feel a lot of grief. Location is part of it. It was where I met my husband, where my life was changed in so many ways. But that's not the most important thing about Claremont School of Theology. What's important about the school is what happens in people's lives, the kind of stuff that's being taught, and that's what matters. And that can happen anywhere.
The educational model that we had and have had and had successfully for a long time in Claremont is frankly no longer tenable. And that has to do with all kinds of things, ranging from costs, expenses, government regulation, changing patterns in what students are looking for. And we found ourselves in a situation where we tried every which way to figure out a way to keep going in the current location, in the current format, and just it doesn't pencil out any way you look at it.
If relocation can allow the school not only to survive but to thrive again, so that the mission of the school can be carried forward, this is how important this all will become. And relocating to Salem, Oregon is ultimately a way to allow Claremont School of Theology to thrive again, to do what it has been able to do in the last 130 years.
When students arrive at Willamette, they will discover an institution which is near the heart of a medium-sized city, the capital of Oregon. What they may not know at first is that Willamette has been here since before there was a state of Oregon, much less a Capitol building. We are the oldest university in the western United States. We were here before even the Oregon Territory was here, founded primarily by a group of Methodist missionaries who saw a need to educate leaders.
Willamette University is the only United Methodist institution of higher education in the West with whom we might partner. It allows us, as CST, to remain a seminary of the United Methodist Church, which we very much want to do.
I think the biggest gifts that CST is bringing to Willamette is critical thinking, rigorous thinking of the ways in which religion has been a force of violence and a force of alienation and prejudice, and yet also thinking creatively and rigorously about the ways that religion and faith can be sources of healing and transformation in the world.
There is a kind of a West Coast ethos to religion. The connection to environmentalism, the connection to social justice, to multiculturalism, those are all a part of the ethos of religion on the West Coast. It's always been about integrating, connecting with a broader liberal arts university, and that will continue once we move to Willamette. Claremont School of Theology didn't just grant me a degree, but it formed me as a pastor, scholar, clinician, activist. And I'm just grateful, like that's amazing to me.
We embody a pioneer spirit. I mean, it's kind of in our DNA, right? I mean, you're actually going from San Fernando Valley to USC and then moving out to the desert here and teaching in Quonset huts from the very beginning. And pioneers theologically. We have been at the forefront of interfaith dialogue, Christian-Buddhist dialogue in the 60s, environmental theology, liberation theology, LGBTQIA theology. This school is always out on the edge, leading the way. We are pioneer people. That's really, for me, the essence of the Claremont School of Theology.
I'm excited for what CST is going to be able to bring to the Northwest.
This will continue to be Claremont's witness to the church and to the world through Willamette.
We will be at the cutting edge of interreligious theological education.
In 50 years, CST will be thriving in the Northwest. It will be a beacon of hope, of progressive theology, of inclusivity, and people say that was a bold move, but it actually worked.
I love the metaphor of the pioneering that Frank Rogers brought in the way he described it. There's a sentence in the New Testament that says, "The Son of Man has no place to rest his head." It somehow has always seemed to me a problem, especially in the Methodist tradition, where clergy were moving all the time into new frontier areas, where John Wesley was standing on street corners, that we'd build big buildings and lock ourselves inside with people we're comfortable with. Jesus' talk is the woman in Samaria and all the people who are at the margins. So for us to be a school that would never settle down, San Fernando, USC, Claremont, and now the last frontier, the final frontier.
The Pacific Northwest.
It fits somehow. And the metaphor of, that first guy that said, like the people complained to Moses, "You've brought us out into the land." That's what the faculty felt like when they left the comforts of USC to come out into the desert, as they called it, the orange grove regions of the so-called Inland Empire, right? But there's something about that restlessness that is indeed the way that we try to do theology, the way we try to train religious leaders who won't just settle down with the past, but will face the kinds of things we face in the present.
Yeah, we have I think a similar kind of, I know, you've been the folks who left, went to the new place. We've been the folk who are left behind in some, the Oregon Health Science University was once our medical school. It moved to Portland, and then we lost track of it. And we actually had a school of theology here called the Kimball School of Theology. I don't know if anybody knows that, but in the 1920s, it also departed for Portland and then was no more. So to now be a place that will imagine new schools and growing in a new kind of way is, I think, a new thing for us. For a long time, we've been sort of wondering, okay, well, is Willamette University, do we aspire to be like the Amherst of the West? Or do we aspire to be a university that has graduate schools and is a kind of a full-service university? And I think we've been debating that in our halls and in our community for quite a long time. And one of the things that the conversation with CST has done for us as a university is really helped us clarify that really what we want to be is more of a university. We want to add this graduate school, but we would like to add other graduate programs as well. And not sort of new invented kind of graduate schools, but traditional graduate schools that would make us more like the full-service private university you would imagine. So in a sense, that's our adventure. That's our starting out into unknown territory. And so let me just say, one thing I heard in the film that, and Frank said it, and you said it also in your remarks, that in your understanding, you clearly understand that religion is very often a problem in our culture. It is the source of conflict. It is the source of bigotry, and yet religion has also been the source of healing and reconciliation and the inspiration for altruism. So there are two sides to religion, and you acknowledge and study it all. And I think that's really helpful and hopeful.
Mm-hmm. It is interesting because you'd expect a school of theology to be the one that's always standing up and giving the apologetic arguments. Like, this is why religion is good, we're advocates. Actually, maybe I could answer that in a personal level, and I think each of my colleagues would have a similar way. I was raised in a good atheist family. My father wrote his dissertation on George Bernard Shaw's critique of religion. I had no religious upbringing at all. And so at age 14, I did how could you rebel against an atheist relativist father in the 1960s, right? So, drugs, sex, none of it would have bothered him. So I came home one day and said, I'm a fundamentalist. And it was the best teenage rebellion ever. It was flattened. I remember telling my parents at breakfast, I knew nothing about any of this. I was just, had heard one sermon or something. But I said, so there's only one book, and all truth is in that one book. My dad taught literature and thought every book was a gem of truth of its own. And I told him, and so there's this Adam and Eve, and they blew it, and God did something about angels and Eden and something, and then Jesus made it all good again, and he's coming back, and he's mad at those who don't believe. And I remember watching my mother cry softly into the breakfast cereal. It was so painful. So I went to a super conservative Christian college, but I started reading science. I thought, I'm going to do science and religion and find out whether science will prove that my religious beliefs are true. But it actually worked the other way around, as it does. I remember a class in my junior year where the professor, some fundamentalist Christian, was talking about Leibniz. And he said, suddenly he stopped us with his hands like this, stared at us with that intense way, and he said, these are the questions. And I got it. It actually is about the questions. So when I teach systematic theology here in the fall, I will say to a room full of Jewish, Christian, Muslim, atheist students, here are the core questions that Christianity has asked. And I'm asking you to grapple with the questions. I'm going to teach you the questions and the various ways folks have answered them. But your final paper is to provide your answer. You're Unitarian, you're spiritual but not religious, you're conservative Methodist, whatever it might be, tell your answer to the questions, but show me that you've wrestled with the questions. And I think that's presence that we want to be at Willamette is to bring questions. How has religion been harmful for centuries? How has it launched crusades and pogroms and racism and hatred and ethnocentrism? And then what areas where might it be helpful in the 21st century? Yeah. And all of us, my colleagues and I, are comfortable with that role of asking the honest questions. And where religion has been a force for evil, then let's say it out loud. Let's not hide from it. Where it's been a force for racism, let's say it out loud. Or for psychological illness, let's say it out loud. And then how can we act redemptively to help repair the damage so that our kids and grandkids, when they speak of that religious or spiritual impulse, it'll be positive. That's what we exist for, I think.
You know, I think a lot of when our students come to Willamette, many of them come from religious backgrounds, and they have sort of two trajectories. One, maybe the majority trajectory, is I'm finally out of the house and I'm away from my parents, and the last thing I'm ever going to do is anything religious ever again. You know? And so they're kind of running away from religion. And they see religious studies off in the distance and don't know what it is, what it possibly could be, and stay away from it. And then a few others come, and they're also from religious backgrounds, and they decide, there's a religion program. Let's go see what that's about. And they come into our classroom and realize that it's not what they hoped it would be. And so there you go. And so what I'm excited about is to have a school in which religion will be engaged in myriad different ways, in a way that we cannot possibly do that now. So looking at sustainability and religion. What is religion, how is the religion and the climate crisis related? That's one of the conversations we've got going now. How is religion related to science? What is the dialogue between religion and science? We have a lot of kids come here wanting to study biology and chemistry because they want to be doctors. But then after they've studied chemistry and biology for a semester, they realize they want something more. They have other larger questions. So how do the sciences relate to the kind of humanistic questions that we're asking in the greater university? One of the things that Claremont's bringing is a storied center for the study of clinical psychology and religion, the Kleinbell Center, named after Howard Kleinbell, who was the leading light in that field for many years, decades really. And so the Kleinbell Center will be here, and they will offer not just the study of psychology and religion, but also a kind of clinical setting where people can go and get counseling and spiritual direction, and I don't know what all they do at the Kleinbell Center, frankly, but these are, just lots of new ways in which our university will present the study of religion in a much broader way. And one of the areas we're not really talking about yet, because we just don't have the horses to drive it, but one of the areas that I think, when I imagine all the different things going on at CST and all the different things going on in various departments at Willamette, is I think that we could really produce here a really interesting and leading center for the study of peace and justice. There are a few universities around the country that have studies, peace studies programs, but they are very, very few. And to have that integrated into our work with the School of Theology, various humanistic disciplines, media studies included, the whole business, yeah. So I think there are just so many new things that we can do now with this new academic and intellectual resource in our midst. But I do want to sort of come down off that lofty place for a moment and ask you a couple of questions. One is, we started this conversation in December of 2017, and now it's 2020, right? Yeah, it is, okay. It's the spring of 2020, okay. And, you know, it's been a long process, and a little bit of this, you know, as we wait. And so just in a brief way, not getting into the weeds or anything, kind of tell us what the process has been and what we're waiting for now.
Yeah. So we are indeed resident here as of the summer. The campus closes on June 30th. So we're really close. We're doing a ceremony for our History on the Spot on April 23rd. Our last graduating class walks across that green grass that you saw in front of that white chapel on May 19th, Tuesday, May 19th. And then we start closing down. Library is on its way up. Most of those books are going to be a part of Willamette's collection. We have one of the strongest theological libraries in the country. But we have to be able to sell the land. And since we own it, that seemed no-brainer. But unfortunately, something called the Claremont University Consortium filed suit against us, saying we couldn't sell the land, that there was a codicil to a 1957 agreement that meant you actually have to give it to us for about 1/10 of its cash value. But that wouldn't be enough money left to make the move, right? We'd have to push our wagons up the hill.
So just to refresh, the basic idea here is we're going to sell the campus, create a large unrestricted endowment with the proceeds of that sale, which would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $40 million, and move to a place where you could use that endowment as a kind of resource and not have the overhead and expenses associated with a freestanding campus. And that's a model that freestanding theological schools have been following across the country now for the last 3 or 4 years. And when this works, it will be the most successful version of that, as far as I know. Yeah. Go on.
So I'm not a lawyer, but it seems like when there's a legal case, the main thing to do is to make sure it never comes to trial. So there seems to be something like filing motions and counter motions and words you've never heard before because they're all Latin, why you can't just have a judge say yes or no, thumbs up or thumbs down. I don't know, are there any lawyers or retired lawyers in the audience? Well, okay, I'm going to be, I talked to Eric at the break. I'll be really careful here. But basically, they made the case last, 3.5 years. And then when they lost, they appealed it. And then they filed a second case. And the judge threw that out of court and actually had them pay our legal fees for the second case, which the judge saw as spurious. But for filing their second case, they've managed to get delays totaling 100 days. Right? So they said, we're going to file a second case against you. Oh, no, an appeals case. But then on the deadline, they said, well, we didn't get around to it, so we need 30 days and then 30 days. And so we're at 100 days, and we've just seen the appeal. So unfortunately, that meant that rather than able to sell and move up here free and clear in July, we have to move up and sort of be on the campus but not fully integrated. Hopefully, people are optimistic that by September we'll have the final decision and we'll be free and clear to move on. But if you're a lawyer, you know, Eric, it's probably not so obvious that it'll all be over by then. Yeah, right. I can see him sitting back going, yeah, I know what they're doing.
So just to be clear, our plan from Willamette's side was not to take in this brilliant but financially struggling institution and say, we'll pay all your bills for you. Our board of directors said very clearly, okay, the plan is to sell the campus and then move. So we're not doing anything legally until you sell the campus and then move. So that has to all take place before we have a merger agreement, which is it's almost ready to go. A lot of the details have been worked out, but we are waiting for this legal case to clear.
Steve, as somebody who's seen something of your schedule, you seem to have like 18-hour workdays, 7 days a week. I get the sense that you and your colleagues aren't exactly just sitting there twiddling your thumbs. So what are some of the academic initiatives and actions that you all have been taking, in like where Willamette's going, but we're a piece of a bigger movement, I think, that could you describe a little bit of the kind of stuff you guys are involved in?
Well, we have what we call the academic subcommittee of the affiliation agreement. And your colleague Andy Dreicher is co-chairing that with me. And we're looking at a number of things. Basically how the School of Theology will relate to other schools. What are the programs we could have with the law school and the School of Theology, for example? Steve Green is one of the nation's experts on the relationship between church and state. So already we have people in our collegium are ready to have that conversation. And so what kind of further conversations can we have between law and religion? The AGSM already has a not-for-profit management track. And so what are the kinds of ways we can build programs we can build between the School of Theology and not-for-profit management? Can we offer a kind of hybrid degree where students would come here, learn about religion and the institutions they're leading, planning to lead, but also learning how to lead them with actual management skills. So those are some basic things. But the biggest conversations we're having are between the School of Theology and the College of Liberal Arts. And there are just many, many ways in which our faculties overlap. If you don't know how theology is studied in a modern School of Theology like Claremont, you should just know, I think, that it operates with the basic, what I would call the basic secular rules of engagement that we operate under in the university. That is, the religious tradition doesn't trump argument, so to speak. I can never use that word anymore in a neutral sense, that everybody's got to be on a level playing field. All the same theorists that we're working with, the postmodern theorists like Foucault and Derrida, they're working with all the same scientific rules of engagement that we use, they use as well. So when Philip is doing a course on religion and science, he's not fudging the science. He has to bring in real science into the conversation. And so the conversations we're having in that respect are really rich around a program in sustainability and religion, around a program of psychology and religion, certainly our religious studies and philosophical studies. So we'll do something with religion and philosophy and the study of philosophy of religion and philosophy at Claremont. That will be certainly a rich conversation. Every School of Theology has a biblical studies department, and that involves studying ancient history and languages. So all of our ancient history and language people are working on this and are excited about the new possibilities for doing those kinds of things. So we have about 6 or 7 conversations going now. I'm going to pull it together, all together in a report. I have to do that by tomorrow afternoon, actually.
No way,
yeah.
Seriously.
So it'll be it's a rich conversation. I don't know how much all this will pan out and how soon. There's a lot of things to do before we get there. So, but just know that the university, we're having university-wide conversations about this, and a lot of people are excited about it. There was a question over here earlier about what's going on in the United Methodist Church. That was your question, yeah. And as you know, the United Methodist Church, which is the largest mainline Protestant denomination in America with around 12 million members, 13, 14? Right, has recently been experiencing what I can only describe as a kind of implosion. And it's over the same issue that has led to the same kind of implosion in other mainline denominations over the last 25 years, namely the question of the church's teachings about gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgendered people, sexual identity, sexuality. And so that is all happening now. It's unfolding in all of its glory. If you watch the church news at all, you see all this. So one of the questions that our Board of Trustees, of course, has raised is, well, here's a Methodist seminary, and it's related to a church that's now in full-on implosion. And so how will that affect the seminary, and how will that affect the plan to bring the seminary to the Pacific Northwest? And so that's the question I would pose to you now, Philip, before we take a few more questions in Q&A. Yeah.
I mean, the short answer is it's not a game changer for our school specifically. So we've been funded by money from United Methodist Church, something called the Ministry Education Fund, MEF, and that's been decreasing for 15 years as the church gets smaller. When UMC was formed in 1968, it was the largest denomination in the United States. But that was also the pinnacle of church attendance. From 68 to 2020, it's been continual decline and becoming more rapid now. I think that's the crucial issue. I had the chance to go back to a nationwide meeting of all the theologians of the seminaries to talk about gay and lesbian question. Could a minister be homosexual, or would that person have to be kicked out? And we tried. We had groups where we mingled, the conservatives and people like CST, the more progressive side. We studied history, we studied theology, we studied scripture together for a week back at Emory University. And I remember the final day. It was a room like this. There were about maybe about this many on that final day. And somebody said, you know, this is really, really wrong. And I remember standing up in this impassioned plea and saying, you know, we trace ourselves back to a theologian named John Wesley in the 18th century. And John Wesley said, it's about grace upon grace. The core teaching of theology is that everything is a grace given to us from above that makes our life possible. The scripture that Wesley preached on more than anything else was 1 John 4, 7 and 8. Beloved, love one another, for love is of God, and he who loves is born of God and knows God. He who does not love does not know God, for God is love. Thousands of times Wesley preached on that. And I said, could we agree that love and grace are most central, that we have that in common? And the gentleman said no. And I remember coming back and thinking, you know, this is not going to work out, okay? If one issue, you know, the sexual practices of the clergy is the most important thing in the world for you. Frankly, young Americans who overwhelmingly don't condemn homosexuals just don't find that a very interesting question. They're worried about the hypocrisy in the church, right? And not what does the clergy do when they're not on the clock. You know, who do they live with? It's just not an issue for young Americans. So that has become the dividing issue. And I should just say, if there's a split of the church, and United Methodist holds on to the anti-gay stance, and some of us, I don't know what we'll call ourselves, continue in that tradition, that it will actually free us to speak more powerfully to the real issues of our day, to speak powerfully. I came back from one of these general assemblies. There was a room full. We had our annual conference, which is where all the Methodists meet, and I was the dean of CST, so I stood up and I looked at this audience, mostly white hair, and they had just heard a condemnation of us. And it felt like the 1960s, when these people were like, young Americans, part of the civil rights movement. And I started sort of preaching to this group of 1,200, 65 and above Methodists who said, we are not going to be silent. And you could just feel the energy. And I think there's actually something exciting about that. At Willamette, our historical Methodist affiliation will be important. And there will be a group of those who look for a progressive Christianity in dialogue with the world's traditions, looking to follow the radical prophetic Jesus and to speak to the needs of our world. And we get to do that whether the United Methodist Church in today's form exists or not.
Would it be fair to say that if there's one place that institutionally that stands for that progressive way forward, that open way forward, it is the Claremont School of Theology?
Yeah, we've been We've been there for so many decades that that's something we just can't go back to anymore. I want to ask you one last question, Steve, and then I'd be interested in hearing, because I don't think we have that much more we have to say, to ask these folks, what service to Salem, to Oregon, and to the Pacific Northwest could a school like Claremont School of Theology at Willamette bring? What needs does it face? What would you like to see us contribute as a graduate school of Willamette and as people who for the coming decades will be here? If some of your questions included statements, I don't know if Anne would allow that, but I would love to be able to do that. But Steve, I want to ask you a closing question, which really is that question, right? What do you think that CST will bring to this region?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a great way of throwing it open and bringing our participants into this conversation. But just let me say briefly, the Pacific Northwest has never had a mainline Protestant school of theology. And this shows in our region in many, many ways. And frankly, before I came to this region, I was part of planning efforts to plant a school here, and it never came to fruition. And various denominations wanted to plant a school in the Pacific Northwest for this reason. It just has never had one. And so this is kind of a dream come true in a certain way for Protestants in this area. But the force of the School of Theology, the Claremont School of Theology, will be, I think and I hope, will be this, that it will be a place where the progressive wing of all the mainline Protestant denominations will be able to identify as a kind of home base. And I think it's very possible and likely even that the School of Theology will become the base for a new kind of ecumenical conversation that may even lead to a new united church, a new church that brings the United Church of Christ and the United Presbyterian Church and the Unitarians and the Disciples and all of the progressive denominations, at least that branch of them together in a new kind of united church. That's a dream, but I think that's certainly possible, and one of the things that I'm looking forward to pursuing. Yeah. So let's do that. Let's turn this now back to you all and ask you, what do you think that you've heard all about the school now and what we're thinking about and planning? What would you think is the school? What do you think the school really bring to this area, to this community? We've got the microphones out there, and they're already in the hands. Yes.
I had a question, Sally Shriver. You may have answered this, but I didn't get it. Why exactly are you leaving Claremont?
Yeah, so it's in the end, it's finances. You just can't pay for a school with 400 students freestanding. It's got to be within a university to balance the books. And so we said, what is a university that has Methodist roots but stands for the teaching that we are not alone as strong, but we are together? The Africans have a word, Ubuntu. I am strong when we are strong. And that, in some senses, I don't know if that's fair, but I've picked that up, both in your words and your actions, that that's what Willamette stands for. And that seemed to us a natural place to bond.
Okay, this is Lucy. We're active, my husband and I, in a Presbyterian church in South Salem. And a question I have is, will you have courses that are non-degree type courses, individual courses that members and or clergy can take part in?
I'm so glad you asked that question. So in my deanship, prior to the current one, we looked for lots of ways to actually make that happen. And the model that I love the most is where you have a lecture series of some topic interested about religion or spirituality or Christianity in today's world. And everybody from the community is invited to a big auditorium. You bring in important speakers from around the world, they speak, right? And then a person can do and pay $5 or whatever, cover the cost of speaker and show up. Or she can attend the whole series at somewhat of a discount. Or she can attend the series and a breakout discussion group afterwards for maybe continuing education units, which clergy have to have. Or she can take it as a class at Willamette, CST at Willamette, where she's actually getting credits because she's interested in the credits. Or she can take that class as part of a degree program that she's doing as Doctor of Ministry or something like that. 5 different options from the same set of 10 speakers that are coming. And we've pioneered that. We did Faith in the Future of the Planet, changed my life by the speakers who came, and we've actually talked about doing that already in the fall. So watch the website, because I think we're going to be able to move forward like that.
All right, right here, this is Irene. Well, I finished an undergraduate degree at Mount Angel Seminary and started working on their master program. And I found it more and more impossible and intolerant for me to be there. It was so male-dominated and so dogmatic, and that's all anybody there wanted. And I couldn't ask a question without being refuted profoundly. So something like this would be, at that time, would have been wonderful and unbelievably wonderful. And so I think I'm not there now. I'm not interested in this world anymore. But for people that are, and that are, it's just not where I'm at. But I think for people who really want something like this, it's probably the most wonderful thing ever for the Northwest, for anywhere.
Yeah, cool, thank you.
Jeanette,
I
think we need to learn how to talk with each other from diverse positions. And any help we can get with that, and it sounds like you're planning for that, that would be wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is Joel over here. I'm wondering, from an administrative perspective, of all of the possibilities with declining enrollments, obviously Claremont is having the same problem. Are you hitching your wagon to a wounded horse or wounded ox or whatever it is? Why this? I know Claremont comes with a brand, but of all the possibilities to serve this community, or the world, educating students, why was this chosen?
Well, the obvious reason why we chose this was because they chose us. And they came to us and asked, can we move in with you? Do you have a spare bedroom? And it turns out we did, Now, if they were bringing a whole lot of their relatives and it was going to be kind of a problem, then we probably would have said no. But it seems to us, we did a long period of due diligence, And if the School of Theology can indeed sell its campus for what everyone says it's worth and follow the plans that they have very carefully laid, this will be a turnkey operation that will become part of our university, will contribute a small amount to our own overhead costs, and will not be a burden on our finances. Now, it's clear, though, that adding a School of Theology is not adding a cash cow. This is not the reason we're doing it. We don't expect that this is going to be the way Willamette University is finally transformed and becomes the great prosperous university that we all hope it will be. It's not going to do that. But what this has done for us is it has really made us focus on this question. Do we want to become a university with more graduate schools? And the answer to that question is definitely yes. And the reason is that the demographics for undergraduate education are exactly as you have described them. They are declining. And this has nothing to do with Willamette University. It has everything to do with people not having enough children out there. So you can talk to your grandchildren and children and tell them to get busy and try to solve that problem for us. In 20 years, we'll be fine. But if undergraduate enrollments are going to continue to decline, and there's every indication that they will, then the universities that will thrive in the future will have to be more diverse. Will have to offer different kinds of educational programs for different parts of the population in order to be viable. And that's true for Willamette University also. We are situated here very, very uniquely, I think, in Salem. Our actual physical location in Salem puts us in a position to move in that direction in ways we have not done before, and I really don't know exactly why. But we're right across the street from the Capitol grounds and state government, and about, 10,000 potential students in a public policy and governance program. Why don't we have a graduate program in that? On the other side of the street, we have the second largest hospital complex in the state of Oregon. In a region of the country, right, we are vastly underserved in terms of medical schools and medical education. There's only one medical school between Seattle and San Francisco, and that's, of course, OHSU, and they graduate about 100 students a year.
Wow.
So we're now starting to think more broadly about where we go as a university, and these are still at the dreaming state, but our plan now, I think I can speak freely about this, that our plan now is to become a university of about 4,000 students. About 1,500 to 2,000 of those will be undergraduate students, and the rest of them will be graduate students in various professional programs. So that our undergraduates can come here and transition into various graduate programs and have a kind of complete education from undergraduate through the graduate level.
And acquiring your first PhD program from outside helps you get accreditation for offering PhD programs faster, right?
Right. We've had to cross all kinds of bridges very quickly, and one of them was to be accredited for different levels of degrees, even in the liberal arts. I don't think we'll have PhDs in the humanistic degrees, humanistic departments anytime soon, but that's now a possibility for us. And so you can see we're moving in that direction. And for those who really thought of Willamette as kind of the Amherst of the West, that's not always been good news. That's been kind of disappointing to them. And okay, but this is where we need to go, and is where we're going now, and so that's a good question. Thank you.
Yeah, this is Don. A question for Philip. And please consider this as a rhetorical question and not an unfriendly question. And I've heard some suggestions of an answer already since I scribbled down the question. Pretend, if you would, that you're speaking to a different audience, an audience that is not representative, that is not 86% affiliated with some religious tradition. Also, there are not even spiritual but non-religious people in this audience. Pretend like instead you're speaking to the 14% composed of humanists, atheists, agnostics, whatever. What can you tell this audience to convince them that the Claremont School of Theology mission is relevant to their beliefs or lack thereof? How can you get this audience to be as excited about the Claremont School of Theology move as you are?
That's a great question. I'm really glad that came. I'll do it briefly. 2 weeks ago on Sunday, I spoke to the Sunday Assembly of San Diego. There's a new international movement of atheist churches, atheist assemblies. And the principle is we don't do faith, we don't do religion, but we do celebrate life together. We try to make a positive impact. And we talk about fundamental values. And I spoke on atheist spirituality and how that's a growing movement for Americans and Europeans. There are a lot of problems with religion and its dogmatism that have just been damaging. We need new kinds of institutions, maybe that are labeled outside of religion altogether. For me as a Quaker, I come from a tradition where we don't hold any beliefs. We sit in silence, and when the silence is over, we try to go out and work for peace and justice in the world. And the people who sit in the benches with me often have no religious belief whatsoever, but they think that we're going to die soon. That's what I often tell myself. And to spend 1 hour a week saying, how can I impact the world in a positive way by sitting and reflecting on my life? A lot of people don't pray. They don't hold any firm beliefs. They don't call themselves Christian, but they do believe that an assembly of people who care about justice and working for peace and humans cooperating together is a really valuable thing to do. I've been called an atheist by conservatives my whole life for holding really radical positions, and I'm comfortable to do that. I am with a faculty of people who have been rejected. Frank Rogers, Center for Engaged Compassion, a Catholic, rejected by virtually every Catholic because of his more radical views. I think that we need people who who will be able to come and say human beings all hold world and life views of different kinds, and whatever that thing is, whatever label you use, humanistic, atheist, agnostic, we have to work together to address the kind of rampant dogmatism and fanaticism that is doing so much damage in the world. And I'm proud to say that for the last 60 years, that's what my school's been involved with.
This is Wes. My life has been evolving around the choirs, and I haven't heard a single thing about music. I was hoping that these choirs would move into your area and help with the music in the church.
I have colleagues who do music, but as somebody who's a terrible singer, I probably would not be the person to launch the choir.
No, I know that's something that President Steve Thorsett has thought a lot about, and he's very excited about the possibilities for church music. And some of our most gifted musicians here are church musicians also. And so to have a school of theology here opens up all kinds of new possibilities in that area. So I think you can look forward to great things there, yeah.
This has been one of the most stimulating sessions we've had at ICL, and I want to thank you and wish you very good luck. It's the best sermon I've heard in years.
Thanks for the welcome.